wanted to make this video. I know I did a Fort McMurray video yesterday, but Canadian Prepper did a really good kind of, I guess you would say maybe a side theme to it, talking about like, climate change, global warming, global cooling, whatever. And I was thinking about this stuff too, and stuff like that, and how that fits into prepping and stuff like that. And again, I usually like stealing his ideas. You got to check out his channel. I think he's one of the best prepper channels. By like the way he lays things out is very good. But I just wanted just to show people something. First off, we have to say, whether you're in the global warming or global cooling crowd, yes, I tend to be moving towards the global cooling crowd because I'm not saying there's going to be an ice age in 10 seconds. I'm saying that given a long enough timeline, we've had 3 snowballers for a couple of reasons. Due to Earth's orbit, we're going to have another ice age at some point. We're going to move further from the sun in our orbit, and we're going to, during a solar minimum, and we're going to have an ice age. And how long it lasts, they typically have a certain amount of time, but the snowballers, they went on a little bit too long. 10 miles of ice straight up. Imagine that, the whole planet. But I just want to show you something. Okay, like right now over there in Calgary and Saskatchewan, or Alberta and Saskatchewan and BC, because they had the El Nino, or the super El Nino, which, yes, Goof, I'll let you off the chain in a minute. It's my girl. He's just hobbling along, poor girlie. Anyway, yeah, 'cause I wanted to go to the bathroom. So, but as warm as they had their winter, because of that El Nino. Now that El Nino was extra warm because there was a fault line that was generating a lot of heat under the ocean. Basically an underwater volcano or whatever, lava flow, or well, the fault line, right? So you got that led to their dry season now so early, which is a lot of concern. Now here, last night was the first night I didn't put on a fire since probably September, and it's May 6th. And I still got, anywhere there's kind of a bit of a shade, like that's in the sun, that's in the sun, but it's still, it's warming up. Like this is okay. Now, mind you, that's where the snow was packed, but the fact that it's May, this is the first May I remember snow still on the ground, and if I go into the bush, in some areas it's probably still 2 feet deep. Yeah, like on the north side of the hill, it'll still be 2 feet deep. So the point here is that regional climate does not dictate global climate. People must understand that. But before I get into whether you should be in this crowd or that crowd, why I go with the, because I'll play it in, and I'll play devil's advocate too and go on both sides for the global warming, global cooling. One of the things, there has been some warming. Nobody can deny that. I think the exact degree was something like a global rise in temperature of like 0.86 of a degree. So not quite 1 degree. So yeah, the temperature went up a bit, but even though we're higher, even the guy who came up with the global warming thing from the UN, I can't remember what his name is again there, but even he says there hasn't been any global warming for the past 19 years. And none significant. And people who tout global warming as, it's the end of humanity or whatever. Well, you have to understand right now, the number 1 wheat exporter right now, basically due to the fact that they're not exporting GMOs, is Russia. They just overtook everybody, including the United States. And above that is us here in Canada. Yeah, crop yields in Canada are like bountiful. I didn't know this, I only found this out last night, actually. And then it's the United States. And 1 or 2 down from that, I think in the 5th place, I can't remember who's above them, but the Ukraine. Like, the Ukraine is, like, producing like crazy. Now, problem is GMO is another side issue. We won't pull that in. But you get the idea. That said, warm weather does not necessarily mean extinction. It can have massive benefits. In fact, if we look at historical things, a little bit warmer is better in most places in the world. When you get cooler, you also get drier. And this is something that's going to play in a second here. Back in 1728 or something like that, there was a volcano that went off in Iceland. And it's a 17-mile-long ridge of a volcano. And that, they believe, led to the deaths of about 2 million people globally because of the global cooling that came from that. Now, volcanic activity, is something that is cyclic. And I'm more in the belief system of that the biggest scam about climate change is that, well, the climate is always changing and trying to pass it off as if it's something new, right? I mean, you only have to look at most of the Earth's history. Even if you're I believe that the Earth is 6,000 years old. Like even at that, in the beginning, you couldn't live on it. So the climate changes. That's there's many times I tend to go 65 million years myself. I mean, you do you believe whatever you want to believe. And in that timeline, again, 3 snowball Earths. Most of the time, the Earth was inhabitable because it was a desolate land. The continent of Pangaea was so freaking hot and dry, it was like living in the Sahara Desert, with the heat turned up. Yeah, so you get the idea. There's also one thing that for the cooling side of things is that after 2011, the sun went from its 11-year cycle of solar maximums to solar minimums. So it's in a solar minimum. But the maximums and minimums go in a longer cycle than that. It's about a 206 or 208-year cycle. And we're just at the beginning of that 208-year cycle. So in other words, between the years 2017 and 2035, we're going to see some pretty, like, 1940s kind of cold, maybe even colder. An indication of this, indication of global cooling, I'm going to bring in sea turtles. This was on Discovery Channel yesterday. It's that recent. North Carolina, which is pretty damn south from here, and I'm in Quebec, so that's almost a province lengths down. You know what I mean? Like, that's pretty far down. They usually pick up during the winter when the colder waters come down. Oh, I guess my dog wants to come in. When the colder waters come down, they usually pick up about 18 or 19 sea turtles a day. But now what has happened, they're picking up like 40 a day. And what's wrong with these turtles, because these turtles being reptiles or whatever. Hey, go if you want to come back in. Okay, hang on. I'll take you out of doggy prison. Give me that leash. And here. Come on. You know how hard this... Anyway, the sea turtles. Here, wait for me. Wait for me. I'm always in a rush. Okay, where are you going? Well, make a decision. Where are you going? There's a cat around, isn't there? Yeah, that's what got you into trouble in the first place. You're interrupting my video. Want to go in the house? Okay. Yeah, I'll get you that nasty collar off if you go in the house. Let's go in the house. Anyway, they're picking up like 40 of these sea turtles. Okay, let's go. Hey, you gonna go up? Come on, let's go. Yeah, you gotta go in straight. Good girl. You could do it. You're a good girl. That's my princess. Yeah, okay, now get out of the way. You're blocking the door, fat ass. All right, hang on. Sorry, technical animal interruptions. It kind of occurs on daily basis. So anyway, problem is these turtles are sinking to the bottom. And the reason why they're sinking to the bottom is because they're getting hypothermic. And they have to collect these sea turtles that get drifted into shore. And yes, I'll get your collar off, you holy humanity. Yeah, dog spends most of her life never ever seeing a collar. She's almost too fat for it, too. Hey, come on. Yeah. Okay, you're free. Well, a thank you would be nice. Yeah, hey, goof. Hey, come here, girl. But anyway, I know. People, why don't you do your videos with animals? Just do what they do, regardless of your video making qualities. But anyway, so the sea turtles are more hypothermic than normal. So that means on the Atlantic side, there definitely is a cool down. The Arctic ice has never been bigger. The past couple of years, 2014 was like amazing amount of sea ice, and North Pole and South Pole, and so it goes thicker, it goes less, it goes thicker. It changes every year, but you get the idea. And the between Greenland and Labrador there, I forget the name of that strait there. Just brain fart, but anyway, right there, that froze up early, that type of thing. So on this side of the country, we're experiencing the cold. It was a pretty cold winter. Not as much snow as I thought we were going to get, but pretty darn close. I mean, there had to be a good 8 or 9 feet of snow all in. I was thinking 16 feet, but I was off. But yeah, if there wasn't that El Nino, I think 16 feet of snow this year, cumulative snow, would have been no problem whatsoever, or more. And if we look at some of the places, off the lake effect, I'm sure they exceeded that by God knows what. And that's a sign of things to come. So global cooling is actually Not some. I'd rather more global warming than global cooling. Why? Because with global cooling, it shortens your crop seasons, right? That type of thing. And that's something preppers have to consider. That if we went back to a 1940s style weather pattern, or even 1970s style weather pattern, again, when I was a kid, there was always snow in the bush in June. You know what I mean? So now seeing snow in May, it's like, okay, I'm seeing this cycle again. You know what I mean? Like it's I've lived long enough to see this cycle again. And I'm not alarmed by it. I'm aware of its presence. You know what I mean? And that's the problem. People get so, Mother Nature's going to do what she's going to do. Look, Fort McMurray right now with the wildfires, doesn't matter really how they started. Man is no match for Mother Nature. But once it gets going, it takes over. Now, the other thing that puts me in the global cooling camp is mainly the sun, is that. But there's another thing, the volcanoes. Right now, usually you have an average per year of 60 volcanoes. We're already at 39. And that is a sign of global cooling. And also, there's something going on with the Earth's core that nobody really understands yet. And it's not really conspiracy theory. There's just science. They're baffled by it. It's something to do with the magnetic thing. This could go back to the Mayan calendar thing with the pole flip, whatever. That said, there's been a few pole flips in the Earth's history as well. So these are things that happen. How do you prepare for them? I don't know if you can really prepare for them. Pole flip, I think you can only just kind of manage and deal. But that's my and there's a whole bunch of other things. I won't go on too long. But I'm really in the global cooling camp, meaning that seasons are going to get shorter for growing stuff. But there's also something that might not sound logical right now, but will probably make sense later on. One thing about colder air, particularly Arctic air, is it's dry. And that means where there is heat, it's probably going to be drier, meaning the Midwest. That's going to be drier. Saskatchewan, Alberta, even BC. BC being coastal, at least they get rain, right? But the other ones, I mean, think about it. Alberta, a lot of areas are below sea level. A lot of areas are below sea level. And that's a gully, and then you've got the Rockies there just kind of cutting off any sort of moisture that could possibly kind of come in, you know what I mean? So with that said, there is a good possibility we could see a Drumheller 2.0 turn into a desert right from the top of Alberta all the way down through to New Mexico. You could see it just complete desert right in the center. Why? Because it's been like that before. And how long ago? Well, a long time ago, but you get the idea. It's where there's just no precipitation there. And that there, in its sense, it would make sense that we would see more moisture on the east, more and more precipitation, or more snow in the east, but more rain in the west, the far west, and then dry in the center. To me, that's my explanation in it. That said, butterfly effect of times a billion. Who knows what Mother Nature does? She does what she does. Now, that said, for the global warming things, yes, there has been some warming. Have the oceans warmed? Yeah, they've warmed on the surface, but not as low as they said. The CO2, I just can't budge on the CO2 thing. It is so far from lethal. Think of all the pollution, China, India, the United States, the biggest polluters in the world. Canada, I don't know where we are on the pollution thing, but we're pretty high up there as well, for industrialized. But in the industrialized, we're not as bad, but, we all contribute. With all the contributing of greenhouse gases and CO2 around the world, okay, from industrialized nations, it doesn't even account for 1%. 1% of the CO2, which right now, trees are at a CO2 deficit. That means they're not getting enough CO2. That's what helps things to grow. So that means you're probably getting trees that are drying out. They're not as plump and water rich as it could be, you know what I mean? The other thing is wildfires in general. Say, well, it's because of global warming. But, for example, around here, if there's a wildfire, I know it's going to be bad because of all the dead spruce. Now, why is the spruce dead, you ask? There's a spruce bug. Yeah, a little bug. But people not knowing that will say, well, it's because of global warming. You know what I mean? That's what you got to watch out for. And that could be the same thing. If it's happening here, it's happening out west, meaning there's a spruce bug that kills the tree. And, you're going to end up with all this dead tinder like matchsticks. So there's that. But if you are in the warming crowd, okay, I'll play devil's advocate here and say, okay, well, there is global warming. Okay, well, we'll say it's all just global warming. Okay, well, whether you're global warming or global cooling, you're talking about the climate changing around. And if it changes around, no matter what, you're going to have to deal with it. Now, what about geoengineering? Also, in the conspiracy world called chemtrails, but if you look at it as geoengineering or aerosol weather modification, the scientific terms, just research geoengineering scientists. I mean, they tell you that they're doing this. There's enough the United Nations has banned weather modification. So if weather modification wasn't possible, they wouldn't put a ban on it. Right? You know what I mean? The science is there. It's easy science to understand how it works and how HAARP works and all that stuff. And it's not conspiracy. It's just you have to have an open mind to understand that, yes, there are people willing to do stuff like this. Now, spraying aerosols in the air, aluminum, barium, strontium, all these bad things, they do dry out the soil. You dry out the soil, kill the trees, right? And other plant lives, crop lives, and stuff like that. So that in itself, yes, that could contribute. But again, man is no match for Mother Nature. If she wants to have a typhoon tomorrow, she'll have a typhoon tomorrow. If she wants to put out those wildfires out west, it'll rain. You know what I mean? Like that type of thing. But the thing to keep in, whether you're in the global cooling camp, global warming camp, it doesn't really matter. The point is that you have to deal with the reality that's in front of you. And I think that's where Canadian Prepper kind of is probably angling his thought process, and the debate that which is good that he allows the open debate, and I always encourage that anyway. Whether people agree or disagree, because sometimes points can be made on either side. Like, okay, well, you're in the global warming cloud, you're in the global cooling crowd. Well, what if you do if either of you are right? And then it's like, okay, it's no longer about the challenge between who's right and wrong. It's like, yeah, what would I do if I was right? Okay, well, what do you do if he's right? Okay, one downside to global warming is going to be water scarcity. That's going to be a big thing, right? The dryness, the heat. The upside is you have stable air, less storms, to a point. I mean, but things can survive in the desert if they know what to do. Australia is a perfect example of that. The Mojave Desert's the Sahara Desert. You got people that cross that darn thing, with a bunch of camels. Like, I mean, it's unbelievable. So people can adapt, and with the technology we have, we can adapt. But global cooling, I think, is a bigger difference. Like, if it was just about it being cold, it would be one thing. But it's not just about being cold, it's about the snow and keeping ahead of the snow. So how did they do it thousands of years ago? Well, it's amazing how they did it thousands of years ago. The mobility and traveling light and like everything was basically, they lived in, like little huts that, once it snowed too much, you just tore down the hut and rebuilt it on the new pack of snow. That type of thing. So they did all these things that were able to keep them alive. And I mean, they did this without any modern day amenities. That's pretty impressive. So if they can do it, we don't have to, it'll be a cinch for a lot of us. Most of the common things around our household could keep us alive in an ice age. You know what I mean? Like, not easily, it would be a struggle, but it could be done. It could be done. Innovation is a, the mother of all inventions is necessity, right? So, but the thing is that, whether you're in one side of the camp or the other, I think it's getting lost on who's right or wrong is really kind of, it's counterproductive, sure. I'm in the global cooling camp because the science tells me that and I've looked at both sides as non-biasedly as I could, and it keeps, every time they put out something, that shows global warming, something comes out and says, well, it's not necessarily global warming, it's this. It's a cycle, it's this, it's this. But the thing that makes the most sense is the big ball and the fire in the sky, and a solar minimum. You can track it through history as far back as you want to go. When the sun's in a solar minimum, things get colder. But things also get drier, you get more volcanic activity, more earthquake activity, and we're seeing a slight rise in that. And it will go and go and go. Doesn't mean everything's going to fall apart. It's a cycle. It's a cycle. But the thing is you have to deal with that weather no matter what. So what happens if the seasons start getting shorter in one area of the country, but larger in the other area of the country? Well, that could be a thing that can, if planned out properly, could benefit all. He was talking about grapes that he ate from California while they're during considering how much water grapes take and stuff like that. Coming from California when they're at a water deficit, that kind of felt a little bit guilty that they still have a water shortage down there and they're exporting, things like that. Yeah, and you mentioned Nestle and stuff like that, using all that extra water while all the citizens have to, kind of cut back, stuff like that. Yeah, but the corporations don't. Yeah, I get that kind of stuff, sure. But that said, you could also look at it this way. If you didn't buy those grapes, it would put people out of work there during a time of water shortage. So there's always pros and cons. You could always spin it. Whatever way you want to spin it, you could spin it. If you want to spin it to guilt yourself, you could do that. If you want to spin it to boost yourself up, you can do that too. If you want to stay neutral, you can stay neutral. Either way, you still have to deal with it, right? But that brings a case in point. We send food to countries that can't grow food hardly at all the time. That type of thing. So if we're talking, for example, bread baskets of the world suffering massive losses, well, the first thing is, what would you do if there was a massive frost? Like last year, the frost took out our tomatoes in June, and then the deer ate the second batch, so we got hardly any tomatoes. But you get the idea. Like, that's the thing about nature. How do you, that's why I'm a big fan of greenhouses, gigantic greenhouses, not really small ones. Small ones are hard to manage because they get too hot. You can't, but using science, like, I don't know why they don't do this up north, have, during the summer months have big, well, they probably do, but, really put an emphasis on build, rather than shipping things in, build like, 1,000 greenhouses out there, or what, maybe not 1,000, but whatever they need to support a callowage or something like that. Summer months, they get sun, they could use the sun, they could harvest the snow or ice or permafrost or whatever, they're not permafrost, but the snow or whatever, have all the water they could possibly ever need in a reservoir for the summer, which is 6 months, grow their food. So if they could do that there, in the winter months, cover the greenhouses and then heat them, and artificial lighting, they could do that. They could also take the byproduct from that, make biofuel to run the lighting, make generators to run the lighting, that type of thing. So things can be done with modern technology, and if it can be done in the Arctic, or be done in the desert, it could be done anywhere. And using permaculture, they've actually grown food in like Sahara Desert. They've done this. It wasn't easy. A lot of infrastructure had to be shipped in and stuff like that to make this happen, and stuff like that, and piping water. But they were able to do this, terraform the desert. Not an easy thing to do, but that would be a different level of thinking, and it would definitely have to be more communal than global. Global is too one cookie cutter, one size fits all. Globalism doesn't work anyway, and it's so inefficient. But a community, for example, there's a lady here, she grows flowers. She's got a huge greenhouse. If there was a world food shortage and stuff like that, I think whether she wouldn't have a say in it, people would commandeer that and say, we're growing freaking food in here if we can't grow it outside. We'll heat it, we'll watch it, we'll use your expertise, whatever, you can manage it. But we're growing food, not flowers, that type of thing. So that's what would happen in those type of things. I think she would probably volunteer it anyway. Say, we'll grow food instead of flowers. I'm not going to let my village starve, that type of thing. But some people don't like that. That you never know. You never know. That said, 16 weeks. It takes 16 weeks to grow an edible crop. I keep pushing that in my doomsday stuff, prep stuff. Although I wouldn't call myself a big time prepper at all. I tend to look a different way at things. That, for example, let's say you were a massive prepper. Okay, great, and you were living in Fort McMurray. Past tense. While your house just took away all your preps. What was plan B? You know what I mean? That type of thing. These are the things that I kind of want people to kind of consider. And I also want people to consider, the environment. In the case of the more you know, the less you need. Something I have to do, and I've been saying this, I know I procrastinate. I should take my own advice someday, and like my grandfather would say, shit or get off the pot, you know what I mean? Like, okay, I should do that. But basically, I want to go on one of those, nature walks where they point out all the things you can eat, that, like all the weeds. There's a guy who does a thing called Eat the Weeds. It's probably a series. It's probably an old series now. It's probably like 6-7 years old, whatever. It's all over the internet. He tells you all the things you can eat. Like, for example, dandelions. I've eaten dandelions. Milkweed. I've eaten milkweed. I've only eaten the stalks. I've never eaten the bulb, and I've never eaten the leaves. I've eaten maple leaves. These things you can eat certain times of year. Early spring, no, they're too bitter. Midsummer, yes, but it's the same problem. All the stuff that you could eat, that grows wild only grows in a few, June, July, August, right? That type of thing. But they are better climate than, like, if you think about it, gardening is not natural to the environment, to North America. Like, almost every vegetable we eat was brought in from another country somewhere else that was organically and naturally there. So that's why I think the frost kills things and stuff like that here. Where if you look at like the organic, like weeds or water crescents and those things with the freaking spikes on it, which apparently you can eat them. I don't know how the hell you eat them, but same like nettles. You can eat nettles, but if you touch a nettle, it stings the shitballs out of you. But somehow you can eat a nettle, and they're good for certain things. Cattails. Yes, you can eat cattails. Good luck pulling them out of the freaking. You're going to expend so much energy trying to get those things. I've done it. I've eaten cattails. They're not very tasty. I think I got them too early in the season. There's all kinds of things. There's buckberries. Sorry, buckcherries. That's a band. Buckberries. There's things like that that you can find. Wild mushrooms. I've had a few. Very very careful with mushrooms. If you don't know what it is, don't eat it. There's so many things out there that'll kill you. But if you can find out what doesn't kill you, then there you go. You can eat a lot of this stuff, but you don't get very much nutrients from it. That's the problem. Nuts and berries and stuff like that, if you know what to pick and when to pick. But again, we're talking about the same amount of time that it would, it's coming out when your garden would be ready, July, August, that type of thing, right? Maybe September. So 16 weeks it takes to grow an edible crop if not everything goes okay. So that's what you're up against if it goes too hot or too cold. How do you maintain a garden for 16 weeks? Well, I think the answer is indoor gardening, greenhouses, climate-controlled environments, hydroponics, stuff like that. If it was a global warming scenario and it was hot and dry, well, one of the things you could do is basically use solar power to regulate your, run your energy. So there are people that live in the Mojave Desert, and they know how to live there. And they know how to live with minimal amount of water, that type of thing. There's some survivalists out there that do that. So that's on one side. And there's people that live up in the Arctic. So if you want extremes, Mojave Desert to the Arctic, or the Australian outback, or the Sahara Desert, how do those people live? How does a goat farmer and a camel, herder live in the, in the desert? You know what I mean? Like, how do they live there? The Tuaregs, those type of people, And they have no modern anemones. These people are still living, like they did thousands of years ago in a lot of ways. The only modern anemones they might have is some steel buckets and a few, leather bags or something. You know what I mean? That type of thing. But their knowledge is given from the land, so they work with what they have. They deal with it. And I think that's something that, getting on to the more apocalyptic part of what I think he was getting at was, and I know what he was thinking too, and he's thinking the same thing I'm thinking. About, again, we have fires here in Quebec too. Usually they're more north, but, how do the fires start? It doesn't really matter as much. I mean, I'll go on the conspiracy side of things. Massive job layoffs. I mean, right now there are, another 2,100 jobs lost in that area. Plus, whatever knows what the disaster is going to come out of this, how many people are going to lose their job. Why? Because 1,600 buildings burnt down, a lot of businesses, right? So out of that, how many are going to be unemployed, right? That type of thing. But with that, all these job losses and stuff like that, maybe somebody was thinking insurance. You know what I mean? It could be as simple as that. He suggested it could be the right amount of sun reflection on a beer bottle lying in the dry grass. Yeah, he's right. There's a million ways it could start. There's also firefighters. There was one not too long ago out in that, I can't remember if it was in Alberta or Saskatchewan or Manitoba. I can't remember, a firefighter. Again, there are firefighters that are pyromaniacs. Like they do arson all over the place. I forget what they call it. There was one firefighter, this is a few years back. He was lighting fires, because he got used to running in and saving people. So he'd light a fire, get there in time, and save a person. But one scenario, some people died. A horrible way to go. And they found out it was, like, they suspected him. Like, trust me, the fire departments, they watch their members. Now, volunteer fire departments like what we got here, I don't think it's quite as strict, but they watch, and I imagine there would be things because, maybe it's the adrenaline junkie thing. So some people become serial killers, some people become arsonists because, oh, hey, I went in and saved these people. They got all this notoriety, and it became a cause in their life. Maybe the rest of maybe the rest of their life is in shambles, and that's something. It's like the mother who kills her children for sympathy, that type of thing. And these things happen, right? As sick as they sound. But, again, that could be it. It could be sabotage from other countries. Canadian dollar's going too high, and we don't want competition with the oil. There we go. Insurance company for this company, that you never know. It could be as sinister as that. Or as simple as throw their cigarette away, not putting it out. Do that. Damn it. Especially when it's dry out. You should know better. Cigarettes have started tons of fires like that. Campfire. People got drunk, didn't put out the campfire right. Burning a bale of hay. Usually most of the fires in my region is some farmer burning bales of hay, and it gets away and starts, the field goes up. One thing we do here is we burn our fields very early in the spring. As soon as we can see dry grass, we burn it. And the snow is all over the place, we burn it all. And we do that controlled burn. Some areas you can't do that anymore, and that's a problem. This is the problem like in California, where they're saying, oh, the wildfires are from all the, that they got down there was because of global warming. No, it wasn't. Again, you have to look into it. Years ago, and it's the same even around here, you have to understand, logging isn't what it used to be. That type of thing. The old growth forest, the stuff that's dead and not on the ground and rotting, but the stuff that's still standing but dead. Old cedar swamps, pine and spruce just dried out, a bunch of twigs, gray twigs everywhere. They used to clear all that. They used to cut that around populated areas. I mentioned this in the last video. They don't do that anymore. There'd be a great job for welfare recipients. Rather than giving them welfare, pay them, give them a skill. If you can handle a chainsaw, yeah, it's dangerous. But, and I know there's always you get the guy, he doesn't want to work, and he revs the chainsaw, doesn't put oil in it or whatever. Okay, yeah, you're going to deal with that. But you could put people on it and say, okay, well, here's the thing. We're going to teach you how to use a chainsaw safely. You're going to go to the bush, and if you're just going to fuck the dog or whatever because you don't want to work, we're going to cut your benefits, or you're going to work. Or you go find another job. Or if you're a good worker, we'll pay you a little more. Basically, it's another government. It's a public works project at this point. And we'll get you to clear all the brush, all that stuff. They used to do that in California. They don't do that anymore. There's no budget there anymore because they're too afraid to make people work for a living. Same thing up here. They're too afraid to make people work for a living. Well, that would save so many communities. Controlled burns, they can get out of control easy too. But there's this time of year when you can do it and a time of year you can't. Now, there's a lot of people now that think this is the time of year to do it. It's too late now. And if you were to light a fire in a grassy field right now, man, you'd be surprised how fast that goes up. But the reason why the grass is green right now out there is because we burnt off all the dead stuff. So there's nothing to catch. It would have to get really dry for it to catch. Doesn't mean it won't, but yeah, we'll have to watch. So that said, how it starts, I don't think really matters as much. Could this be a future, and this I think is what he was hinting at, could this be a future we could be looking at is forest fires all over the place and, devastating? Yeah, it could be. It very well could be. Again, every time there's a fire north of us or whatever, it's pretty scary. Now, the size of the fire is about the size of Calgary itself. About 85. It went from 10,000 hectares to 85,000 hectares pretty quickly. That can get even bigger, even quicker. But one thing about fire is that it is a rebirth. And once it's burnt everything, you've got nitrate in the ground. One rainfall, everything turns green. 2 rainfalls, everything turns lush. You know what I mean? But that's the way fire is. But the good thing about the fire is that it gets rid of all the old growth stuff. And that's why they used to do bushfires on purpose to get rid of it. It was like, okay, well, we know the trade winds go this way. It's this time of the year. They would burn swamps. They would burn this. They would burn that. And it'd be controlled. And they used to do this. It's very dangerous. They don't do it as much now because it's too out of control. But they would get all the old dead stuff and just burn it away. And then all this lush green stuff comes up, which is better, right? Yeah. So I think a lot of the fire stuff we see has to do with bad forest management. In BC, I think they do a little better with the forest management in that sense. There's a difference between not cutting a tree down and getting rid of the old dead stuff. I do like the idea of conservation cutting, all the old growth stuff, cut it all down, get it out of there, because it allows things to come up. You can leave a certain amount of it to rot on the ground. If it's on the ground and rotting, no problem. Problem is with the dead spruce and stuff, it stays like that for 1,000 years, sticking straight up in the air. And it just dries and dries and dries until it finally burns or something. If you're lucky, some of the lichen, which is very flammable as well, will overtake it, but then the lichen will help to break down and create moss. And then once you got moss on your wood, then it's usually going to rot. Like it's going to hold a bit of moisture. That said, you need to get the rain for the moisture. So, but either way, you'd have to deal with it. If we did go to the worst case scenario, kind of like the movie The Road, where everything's just burning for whatever reason. And one thing about the movie The Road is it doesn't tell you what happened. It doesn't tell you what happened. All you know is there's all these dead trees that are, burnt out, drying, and falling down. They're just, it's all. And if we lived in a world like that, how would we turn it into? How could we, get it going again? Well, again, that's where technology would have to come in. And that's where survival of the fittest would also have to come in. That's where strong community would definitely have to come in to defend yourselves. I think every community would be hunkered down like Fort Knox. Strangers would be definitely, kept at bay. It would be very hard to get into a community. Oh, be quiet, you. Especially my dog. Probably just a cat. But anyway, you get the idea. Somebody's coming here. Anyway, I'm going to have to let you go. So I think it's an interesting discussion. So if you like this kind of content, please consider making a donation to the channel. Links down below. Thank you very much to everybody who has. You can also join up on my TSU link. Can I see the car? It's also down below. It doesn't cost you anything to join up. And be quiet. Yeah, it's down below. It's just there's somebody here. I can't see. Where did they go? They were here. Huh? I'll go out and help them. Anyway, so yeah, my TSU link's down below. Join up. It's a lot of fun. Takes your mind off this scary stuff. Thanks for that. Rate, subscribe, share, comment, like. Be true to yourself. Be true to others. Always do the right thing. And have yourselves a great day. G'day, hi, and welcome. All right. I wanted to make this video. I know I did a Fort McMurray video yesterday, but Canadian Prepper did a really good kind of, I guess you would say maybe a side theme to it, talking about climate change, global warming, global cooling, whatever. And I was thinking about this stuff too, and stuff like that, and how that fits into prepping and stuff like that. And again, I usually like stealing his ideas. You got to check out his channel. I think he's one of the best prepper channels. The way he lays things out is very good. But I just wanted just to show people something. First off, we have to say, whether you're in the global warming or global cooling crowd, yes, I tend to be moving towards the global cooling crowd because I'm not saying there's going to be an ice age in 10 seconds. I'm saying that given a long enough timeline, we've had 3 snowballers for a couple of reasons. Due to Earth's orbit, we're going to have another ice age at some point. We're going to move further from the sun in our orbit, and we're going to, during a solar minimum, and we're going to have an ice age. And how long it lasts, they typically have a certain amount of time, but the snowballers, they went on a little bit too long. 10 miles of ice straight up. Imagine that, the whole planet. But I just want to show you something. Okay, like right now over there in Calgary and Saskatchewan, or Alberta and Saskatchewan and BC, because they had the El Nino, or the Super El Nino, which, yes, Goof, I'll let you off the chain in a minute. It's my girl. He's just hobbling along, poor girlie. Anyway, yeah, because I want her to go to the bathroom. So, but as warm as they had their winter, because of that El Nino. Now that El Nino was extra warm because there was a fault line that was generating a lot of heat under the ocean. Basically an underwater volcano or whatever, lava flow, or the fault line, right? So you got that led to their dry season now so early, which is a lot of concern. Now here, last night was the first night I didn't put on a fire since probably September, and it's May 6th. And I still got, anywhere there's kind of a bit of a shade, like that's in the sun, that's in the sun, but it's still, it's warming up. Like this is okay. Now, mind you, that's where the snow was packed, but the fact that it's May, this is the first May I remember snow still on the ground, and if I go into the bush, in some areas it's probably still 2 feet deep. Yeah, like on the north side of the hill, it'll still be 2 feet deep. So the point here is that regional climate does not dictate global climate. People must understand that. But before I get into whether you should be in this crowd or that crowd, why I go with the because I'll play it in and I'll play devil's advocate too and go on both sides for the global warming, global cooling. One of the things, okay, there has been some warming. Nobody can deny that. I think the exact degree was something like a global rise in temperature of like 0.86 of a degree, so not quite 1 degree. So yeah, the temperature went up a bit, but even though we're higher. Even the guy who came up with the global warming thing from the UN, I can't remember what his name is again there, but even he says there hasn't been any global warming for the past 19 years. You know, and none significant. And people who tout global warming as, you know, it's the end of humanity or whatever, well, you have to understand right now, okay, the number one wheat exporter right now, basically due to the fact that they're not exporting GMOs, is Russia. They just overtook everybody, including the United States. And above that is us here in Canada. Yeah, crop yields in Canada are like bountiful. I didn't know this, I only found this out last night actually. And then it's the United States. And one or two down from that, I think in the fifth place, I can't remember who's above them, but the Ukraine. Like the Ukraine is like producing like crazy. Now, problem is GMO is another side issue. We won't pull that in, but you get the idea. That said, warm weather does not necessarily mean extinction. It can have massive benefits. In fact, if we look at historical things, a little bit warmer is better in most places in the world. When you get cooler, you also get drier. And it's something that's going to play in a second here. Back in 1728 or something like that, there was a volcano that went off in Iceland. And it's a 17-mile-long ridge of a volcano. And that, they believe, led to the deaths of about 2 million people globally because of the global cooling that came from that. Now, volcanic activity, okay, is something that is cyclic. And I'm more in the belief system of that the biggest scam about climate change is that, well, the climate is always changing and trying to pass it off as if it's something new, right? I mean, you only have to look at most of the Earth's history. Even if you're, believe that the Earth is 6,000 years old, like even at that, in the beginning, you couldn't live on it. You know, so the climate changes. That's, you know, there's many times I tend to go 65 million years myself. I mean, you know, you do you believe whatever you want to believe. And in that timeline, again, 3 snowball Earths. Most of the time, the Earth was inhabitable because it was a desolate land.